It's the 24th January in 1961. An American B-52 bomber is on its daily patrol over North Carolina. On board, 2 nuclear bombs, each over 250 times more powerful than the bomb dropped on Hiroshima. Suddenly, the bomber breaks apart midair, quickly descending towards the ground. The crew has to leave the dying bomber behind and hoping that the nukes won't detonate. This is the story of how the US almost nuked itself and why it almost caused World War III. It's 1961 and the Cold War could turn hot anytime. The two major superpowers at the time, the US and the USSR, were sure that the other would soon launch a nuclear strike. In order to be ready to react instantly, the US had bombers in the air 24/7, which patrolled on certain routes. This was also called Operation Chrome Dome. If the Soviets would start a surprise attack, there would be bombers with nukes ready to respond. It's the night of January 23rd, 1961. A B-52 Stratofortress, call sign Keep 19, takes off from Seymour Johnson Air Force Base in North Carolina. The mission is routine. On board, 2 Mark 39 thermonuclear bombs, able to destroy everything within 30 kilometers almost immediately and causing a radiation that would spread hundreds of kilometers. For hours, Keep 19 follows its assigned route. Then comes the call for refueling. The bomber rendezvouses with a KC-135 Stratotanker to take on fuel midair, a maneuver that is supposed to be routine. But something is wrong. The crew in the tanker spots a serious issue. The bomber is leaking fuel at an alarming rate. Over 37,000 pounds are lost in just a few minutes. The aircraft is now in danger of becoming uncontrollable. The order is clear. Return to base immediately. The pilots struggle to turn the massive aircraft around, but as it descends toward North Carolina, things spiral out of control. The weight imbalance from the lost fuel makes the B-52 unstable. The pilots fight to regain command, but the bomber isn't listening. At 10,000 feet, disaster strikes. A loud crack echoes through the fuselage. One of the wings is tearing apart. The enormous aircraft begins to break up midair. Inside, chaos erupts. The crew scrambles to eject. Some manage to escape, others are not so lucky. The bomber is now in free fall, spiraling toward the ground. But it's not just the wreckage that's falling. As the aircraft disintegrates, one of the nuclear bombs is violently ejected. The fail-safes are supposed to prevent an accidental detonation, but the bomb's release mechanism has engaged. It is now armed. With its parachute deploying, the weapon descends toward Goldsboro, North Carolina. If it detonates, the explosion will be catastrophic. Millions of lives could be at risk. As the wreckage of the B-52 slams into the ground, one of its nuclear bombs is still lodged inside, buried beneath the twisted metal. But the other bomb, released from the aircraft mid-fall, descends toward the earth with its parachute deployed, its activation sequence engaged. In that moment, North Carolina is just seconds away from disaster. The nuke approaches the ground, but instead of slamming into open farmland, the bomb crashes into a tree near Goldsboro. Silence follows. There's no explosion, no blinding flash, no fireball consuming the sky. Somehow, the worst has been avoided, but just how close had the United States come to destruct itself? In the chaos of the crash, military response teams are scrambled immediately. Air Force personnel, explosive ordnance disposal experts, and government officials race to the scene. They have one mission: secure the nuclear weapons before anything else goes wrong. When they arrive, what they find is terrifying. The first bomb, hanging in a tree, had gone through almost every step of its detonation sequence. Of its 6 safety switches designed to prevent an accidental nuclear explosion, 5 had failed. Only a single low-voltage switch had stopped the bomb from triggering a multi-megaton blast. Had it failed, millions of people could have died, with radioactive fallout spreading across the East Coast. But the danger isn't over. The second bomb, still trapped in the wreckage of the B-52, poses another problem. If the impact has damaged its internal mechanisms, it could still detonate. Recovery teams work desperately, carefully extracting the device from the crash site. By sheer luck, this bomb is intact and remains disarmed. Disaster is narrowly avoided. Twice. With the weapons recovered, the US government immediately classifies the incident, burying the details from the public. For decades, the full extent of what happens in Goldsboro remains hidden. It isn't until 2013, when a declassified document is released, that the world learns the terrifying truth. One switch, one fragile, final safeguard. That's all that prevented a nuclear catastrophe. But how could that have led to World War III? Had even one of these bombs exploded, the blinding fireball and the unmistakable mushroom cloud would have been visible for hundreds of miles, and could have easily been mistaken for a Soviet nuclear attack. If US military commanders had believed an enemy strike was underway, a nuclear retaliation could have been ordered, and a full-scale war might have followed. Even without immediate retaliation, the political consequences alone could have shattered global diplomacy, making future conflicts, like the Cuban Missile Crisis just a year later, far more dangerous. The Goldsboro incident was a wake-up call, one that nearly came too late. It exposed dangerous flaws in the way nuclear weapons were handled, transported, and safeguarded. If a single low-voltage switch was all that prevented catastrophe, what did that mean for thousands of other nuclear weapons in the US arsenal? In the aftermath of the incident, serious questions were raised about nuclear safety. The Air Force reviewed its procedures for handling and securing nuclear bombs, but it wasn't until later near misses, such as the 1966 Palomares incident in Spain and the 1968 Huel airbase crash in Greenland, that major changes were finally implemented. One of the most significant reforms came in the 1970s, when the US military introduced permissive action links, also called PALs, security devices that required special coded authorization before a bomb could be armed. These safeguards were designed to ensure that a nuclear weapon could never be detonated by accident, human error, or an unauthorized launch. Additionally, the US gradually phased out Operation Chrome Dome, the Cold War era strategy that kept nuclear-armed bombers constantly in the air. The military instead focused on missile-based nuclear deterrence, reducing the risk associated with airborne weapons. Hey, if you like our content, consider subscribing to not miss out on new videos. And watch this video about Operation Franken, when a British special unit invaded a port with just canoes.